You're standing in your kitchen, and your partner asks a simple question about dinner plans. But something in their tone, maybe it's slightly rushed, maybe there's a hint of impatience, sends a familiar electric current through your nervous system. Your chest tightens. Your breathing becomes shallow. Suddenly, you're not a capable adult in your own home. You're 8 years old again, bracing for disappointment, criticism, or the devastating silence that meant you'd somehow failed to be what was needed. This is how childhood trauma lives in your body now. Not as dramatic flashbacks or obvious triggers, but as 1,000 tiny moments where the past hijacks the present so seamlessly that you might not even notice it happening. Most of us carry childhood wounds that we've never fully acknowledged, let alone healed. We tell ourselves it wasn't that bad, that others had it worse, that we turned out fine. We've learned to function, to achieve, to build lives that look successful from the outside. But the trauma lives on in ways so subtle and pervasive that we've mistaken its symptoms for personality traits, its coping mechanisms for character flaws, its protective strategies for who we simply are. Childhood trauma doesn't always announce itself with sirens and flashing lights. More often, it whispers through the spaces between your thoughts, shapes the choices you don't realize you're making, and creates patterns so familiar they feel like home, even when they're slowly suffocating you. Maybe it shows up as the perfectionism that drives you to excel, but never allows you to rest. You learned early that love was conditional on performance, that approval had to be earned through achievement, that your worth was directly tied to your ability to meet expectations that always seemed to shift just out of reach. Now you find yourself trapped in cycles of overwork and burnout, chasing a finish line that keeps moving, trying to prove your value to an audience that exists primarily in your own wounded psyche. Perhaps it manifests as people-pleasing so automatic you've forgotten you have preferences of your own. Somewhere along the way, you learned that your needs were too much, your feelings too big, your authentic self too inconvenient for the adults who were supposed to care for you. So you became a master at reading rooms, anticipating needs, shrinking yourself to fit whatever space others required you to fill. You say yes when you mean no, agree when you disagree, and wonder why you feel invisible even in rooms full of people who appreciate your endless accommodations. It might appear as hypervigilance disguised as intuition, the way you scan every environment for potential threats, read micro-expressions like a survival manual, and maintain a constant state of alert readiness that you've labeled as being aware or sensitive. Your nervous system learned early that safety required constant monitoring, that relaxation was a luxury you couldn't afford, that letting your guard down was dangerous. Now you're exhausted by a level of alertness that others don't seem to need, wondering why you can't just relax like everyone else seems able to do. The trauma might show up in your relationship patterns, the way you're drawn to people who feel familiar even when they're unavailable, critical, or inconsistent. You might find yourself recreating childhood dynamics, playing out old roles, trying to heal original wounds through partners who can't possibly give you what your child self needed. Or perhaps you've gone the opposite direction, keeping people at arm's length, afraid that true intimacy will reveal the brokenness you're convinced lies at your core. It could manifest as emotional dysregulation that you've learned to hide so well that even you don't recognize it. The rage that feels disproportionate to the trigger, the sadness that seems to come from nowhere and threatens to swallow you whole. The anxiety that hums in the background of your days like white noise you've learned to ignore. You might find yourself numbing these feelings with work, substances, shopping, scrolling, sex, or any other behavior that temporarily distances you from the intensity of your inner world. Your childhood trauma might live in the voice in your head, the internal critic that sounds suspiciously like a parent, teacher, or caregiver who made you feel small. This voice offers running commentary on your failures, highlights your inadequacies, and ensures you never feel quite good enough no matter how much you accomplish. You've internalized their judgment so completely that you no longer need external criticism. You provide a steady stream of it yourself. Perhaps it shows up in your relationship with your body. The disconnection from physical sensations, the tendency to push through pain or ignore your body's signals the way you might dissociate during stress or struggle to feel grounded in physical space. If your body wasn't safe as a child, if it was hurt, neglected, or violated, you might have learned to live primarily in your head, treating your body like a vehicle you inhabit rather than an integral part of who you are. The trauma might manifest in your relationship with success and failure. Maybe you sabotage yourself just as you're about to reach a goal, unconsciously confirming the old belief that you don't deserve good things. Or perhaps you can't tolerate any form of criticism or setback because it activates the same shame you felt as a child when you disappointed the adults you depended on for survival. These patterns aren't character defects, they're brilliant adaptations that helped you survive situations that were genuinely difficult or dangerous. Your perfectionism protected you from criticism. Your people-pleasing ensured you stayed connected to caregivers you needed. Your hypervigilance kept you safe in environments that were unpredictable or threatening. These strategies worked when you were small and powerless, and your psyche holds on to them because they once meant the difference between connection and abandonment, safety and danger. But what served you then may be limiting you now. The coping mechanisms that protected you as a child can become prisons that prevent you from fully experiencing adult life. The survival strategies that once kept you safe can now keep you from the very things you most long for: authentic connection, inner peace, a sense of belonging in your own life. Healing childhood trauma isn't about analyzing every memory or understanding every pattern intellectually. It's about creating new experiences in your nervous system, teaching your body and psyche that the old dangers no longer exist, that it's safe to respond to the present moment rather than react from past wounds. Healing begins with recognizing that your responses make perfect sense given what you experienced. This isn't about blame or victimhood, it's about compassion for the child who developed these strategies and acknowledgement that they were doing the best they could with what they had. When you can see your patterns as protective rather than pathological, you create space for them to evolve. The healing process involves learning to differentiate between past and present, between what was real then and what's real now. When your partner asks about dinner plans and your nervous system activates, you can pause and ask, what is actually happening right now? Am I in danger? What does my adult self know that my child self couldn't understand? Healing requires developing a relationship with your body and nervous system, learning to recognize when you're triggered, and developing tools to return to the present moment. This might involve breathwork, movement, mindfulness practices, or somatic therapies that help you feel safe in your own skin again. It involves reparenting yourself, learning to give yourself the comfort, validation, and unconditional love that you needed as a child. This isn't about fixing yourself or becoming perfect. It's about creating internal conditions that allow your authentic self to emerge from beneath the protective layers you've built. Healing trauma often benefits from professional support. Therapists trained in trauma-informed approaches who can help you navigate this process safely and effectively. This work can't always be done alone, and seeking help isn't a sign of weakness. It's an act of courage and self-care. The goal isn't to eliminate all traces of your past or become someone entirely different. It's to expand your range of responses, to give yourself choices where you once had only automatic reactions. It's to live from the wisdom of your adult self while honoring the experiences of your child self. As you heal, you might notice that you can receive criticism without it feeling like annihilation. You might find yourself able to say no without excessive guilt or explanation. You might discover that you can be authentic in relationships without fearing abandonment. You might realize that success doesn't have to be pursued frantically to prove your worth, and failure doesn't have to confirm your deepest fears about yourself. The most profound healing often happens not through dramatic breakthrough moments, but through countless small instances of choosing differently. Moments when you catch yourself in an old pattern and gently redirect toward a new response. Each time you choose the present over the past, you're rewiring neural pathways that have been running the same program for decades. Your childhood wounds don't define you, but acknowledging them can liberate you. The trauma you experienced wasn't your fault, but healing it is your responsibility, not because you owe it to anyone else, but because you deserve to live fully in the present rather than constantly reacting to a past that no longer exists. The child within you who learned these protective patterns is still there, and they deserve your compassion, your patience, and your commitment to creating the safety they never fully experienced. Healing isn't about leaving that child behind. It's about finally giving them what they always needed so they can stop running the show from the shadows. You are not broken. You are not too damaged to heal. You are not destined to repeat these patterns forever. You are a survivor who developed incredible resilience, and that same strength that got you through childhood can carry you toward the wholeness you deserve. The hidden ways your trauma shows up are invitations, opportunities to recognize where you're still living in the past and choose to step fully into the present. Each pattern you uncover is a doorway to greater freedom. Each trigger you learn to navigate is a step toward the life you were meant to live before the world taught you to live so carefully. Your healing matters, not just for you, but for everyone whose life you touch. When you break these patterns, you break generational cycles. When you heal your wounds, you model possibility for others. When you choose wholeness over fragmentation, you contribute to the healing of the world. The journey isn't easy, but it's possible. And you, in all your complexity and resilience, are absolutely worth the effort.